The energy inside the America's Got Talent theater buzzed like electricity through a live wire. Hundreds of audience members murmured with excitement, the sound of shifting seats and subtle whispers blending into a low hum that echoed across the massive hall. Bright lights swept over the crowd, lacing the air with anticipation. The judges' panel glowed beneath the stage lights. Simon Cowell leaned back with a look of mild curiosity. Heidi Klum tapped her fingers on the golden desk. Howie Mandel scanned the audience with a playful smirk, and Sofia Vergara adjusted her sparkling earrings, waiting for the next performer to walk onto the legendary stage. Then the backstage curtain rustled. A small silhouette emerged, slight, almost fragile, carrying the posture of someone who had traveled far for a single chance. It was Miguel Miggs Ramos, a 16-year-old from Cebu City, Philippines. He clutched a vintage silver microphone head he'd been given by his late grandfather, turning it slowly in his hand like a sacred charm. A staff member nudged him gently, whispering, "You're up next." Miggs swallowed hard. The stage manager signaled him forward, and the boy took a long breath before stepping into the blinding spotlight. The crowd hushed, instantly sensing something different about the trembling teenager with the dark wavy hair and soulful eyes. His shoes squeaked softly against the polished stage floor. He paused at the center, staring at the enormous space before him, camera cranes gliding overhead, beams of golden light sweeping the stage, and thousands of eyes waiting to judge the very first sound he would make. Simon glanced down at the audition form, raising a brow. "Hello," he said, voice echoing warmly. "What's your name, and where are you from?" Miggs steadied the microphone, his voice barely above a whisper. "My name is Miguel Ramos, but everyone calls me Miggs. I'm from Cebu, Philippines." A gentle wave of cheers rippled through the room. A few Filipino flags waved proudly from scattered audience members. Simon's expression shifted, part interest, part expectation, part skepticism. "And what are you going to do for us today?" Simon asked. Miggs hesitated for a heartbeat. His fingers tightened around the mic. "I'm going to sing an Elvis song." A murmur spread across the crowd. Curiosity mixed with caution. The bar for Elvis covers was high. Many had tried, few succeeded. Simon's eyes narrowed slightly, a tiny smirk forming on his lips. "Elvis," Simon repeated. "That's a big name to take on." Miggs nodded, his voice steadying with quiet courage. "My grandpa used to sing Elvis to me. He said music could change anything, even your future." The lights dimmed. A hush fell. The air tensed the way it does right before a thunderstorm breaks. Then, silence. A single spotlight isolated the Filipino teen, framing him in a halo of gold. The first soft chords of the instrumental began to play, slow, soulful, nostalgic. It was "Can't Help Falling in Love." Miggs closed his eyes. For a moment, he wasn't in front of judges, cameras, or a massive crowd. He was back in his grandfather's small living room in Cebu, given a microphone made out of a rolled-up receipt, standing barefoot on cool tile floors, as his grandfather strummed an old guitar. The scent of warm pandesal filled the room, and outside, the sound of jeepneys rumbled faintly through the neighborhood. Back then, his grandfather would say, "Sing with your heart, Hijo. People don't remember the sound. They remember the feeling." Miggs inhaled deeply, and then he began. The first note drifted out of him, soft and warm, caramel smooth with a trembling depth that made the audience shift in their seats. The tone was unmistakably Elvis-inspired, but the voice, gentle, youthful, yet hauntingly rich, was uniquely his. A gasp rippled across the room. The judges leaned in. Sophia's eyes widened. Heidi covered her mouth. Even Simon, known for his stone-faced composure, straightened sharply as if something had pulled him forward. Miggs kept singing, the sound growing stronger, steadier, wrapped in emotion so raw that you could almost see his memories woven into the melody. His voice carried a kind of vulnerability that held the audience in a trance, each note tender, each phrase dripping with sincerity. But it wasn't just the voice, it was the feeling behind it. His eyes glistened under the lights, and his hands trembled slightly as he held the mic close, as if sharing a secret he had kept for years. The crowd felt it. This wasn't a boy showing off his talent. This was a grandson honoring a man who believed in him long before the world ever would. The camera panned across the crowd, people frozen with parted lips, some gently swaying, others clutching their hearts. A few Filipinos in the audience wiped tears, whispering prayers and encouragement under their breath. Miggs reached the emotional rise of the song, his voice soaring with a richness far beyond his years. The lights behind him slowly brightened into a soft golden cascade, illuminating him like a star finally stepping out of the shadows. Simon exchanged a stunned glance with Heidi, his usual skepticism replaced with something rare, awe. By the time Miggs ended the final line, the theater was so silent that even the soft click of a camera shutter echoed like a thunderclap. And then, the crowd erupted. People shot up from their seats. Cheers exploded from every corner of the hall. Sophia applauded wildly. Howie shouted, "Whoa!" And Heidi placed a hand over her heart. Even Simon couldn't hide his astonishment. He leaned forward, lips parted, eyes fixed on the boy who had just transformed the entire atmosphere. The moment was unforgettable. And Miggs, he stood there stunned, overwhelmed, eyes wet, not from fear anymore, but from the realization. He had just touched the world. The roar of the audience still thundered through the theater, echoing off the high ceilings like a wave that refused to settle. Miggs stood frozen in the center of the stage, breathing hard, his small chest rising and falling as if he had just run miles. The bright lights washed over him, yet he barely felt their heat. He felt only the trembling aftershock of releasing everything he had carried inside him for years. Slowly, the applause softened, turning into a lingering, breathless anticipation. Everyone wanted to know what the judges would say. Simon Cowell leaned back in his chair, fingers pressed thoughtfully against his lips. His eyes remained locked on Miggs with an intensity that made the entire room lean forward. Few performers ever pulled that reaction out of him. When they did, it meant something big. But for now, Simon stayed silent. The silence itself was powerful. Miggs swallowed, glancing at the faces before him, faces he had only ever seen on screens back in Cebu, and now they were right there, watching him, judging him, feeling something because of his voice. Howie Mandel spoke first. "Wow. Just wow," Howie said, shaking his head like he couldn't believe what had just happened. "You walked out here looking like you weren't sure of yourself at all. But when you opened your mouth..." He pointed dramatically toward Miggs. "Elvis didn't just come back. He came back with a brand new heart." The audience erupted again. A few people yelled, "Yes, and go Miggs! Mig!" S. pressed a hand over his chest in gratitude, trying not to tear up. Sofia Vergara leaned forward next, her voice full of warmth. "You know, I wasn't expecting that," she said with wide eyes. "You look so sweet and shy, and then suddenly, boom! You transformed. It was like watching a movie. You made all of us feel something very beautiful." Miggs bowed slightly. "Thank you, Poe," he said instinctively, making Sophia smile at the polite Filipino mannerism. Heidi Klum clasped her hands together and beamed. "Your voice is so pure," she said. "There's something magical about the way you sing. It's like you're not trying to copy Elvis, you're honoring him. And your emotions, we all felt them." As Heidi spoke, the camera zoomed in on Miggs' eyes, glass-like, trembling, reflecting the lights as though holding tiny stars inside. A quiet hush settled again. Everyone turned to Simon. He hadn't moved, not a blink, not a breath wasted. His stare was unreadable, sharp, calculating, yet strangely gentle. Miggs braced himself. Simon leaned forward, placing both elbows on the desk. "Miggs," he began slowly, his British accent smooth yet serious. "When you walked onto this stage, you looked terrified. You could barely speak. I honestly thought you might struggle." Miggs felt his stomach drop slightly. Simon continued, "But then you started to sing." He paused. The crowd leaned in. "And the moment you did, something changed in this entire room." The audience murmured in agreement. "It wasn't just your voice," Simon said. "It was the feeling behind it. You sang like someone who has lived a whole story, someone who carries memories and emotions bigger than himself. That is very rare for someone your age." Miggs blinked, overwhelmed. "When you sing," Simon added, "you don't imitate Elvis. You bring out the soul of the song, but with your own heart. And that," he pointed at Miggs, "the T is what makes a real artist." A lump formed in Miggs' throat. Simon leaned back, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth, a smile so rare the audience gasped. "But," he added, "I want to ask you something." The theater fell silent again. "What made you choose Elvis today? You could have sung anything." Miggs clutched his silver microphone, turning it slowly in his hands, exactly as he had backstage. He took a breath. "My Lolo, my grandfather," he answered softly. He loved Elvis. He always sang those songs for me. He said Elvis had the kind of voice that could touch hearts, and he told me that if I learned how to sing with my heart, maybe one day I could touch people too. He paused. He passed away last year. A soft, collective awe rolled through the crowd. Mig's voice cracked slightly. "I wanted to sing Elvis today because I wanted him to hear me, somehow." Sophia dabbed the corner of her eye. Heidi's lips trembled. Even Howie looked away for a moment. Simon's expression softened in a way that made cameras zoom in instantly. He took a long breath and said quietly, "I think he heard you, and I think he'd be incredibly proud." Miggs lowered his head, tears forming again, but not from sadness, from healing. The audience erupted once more, but Simon raised a hand, signaling them to hold. "I want to say one more thing," he continued. "Performances like yours, they remind us why we do this show, not for perfect singers, not for trained voices, but for moments, real, emotional moments, where someone stands on the stage and gives the world a piece of their soul." Miggs felt his knees tremble. His throat tightened. "So," Simon said, leaning forward again, "this is one of those moments." The entire hall waited. Silence. Energy humming. A heartbeat suspended. Simon slowly turned toward the golden buzzer in front of him. A gasp swept across T. Room. Miggs widened his eyes, his breath catching. The other judges smiled knowingly. Simon placed his hand just above the buzzer, hovering, teasing the tension. "Miggs," he said, "you deserve something very special today." The crowd exploded into screams. Miggs' hands flew to his mouth. Simon smiled, and then, slam! His Paulden confetti blasted into the air. The audience roared. Miggs dropped to his knees, sobbing as the music swelled. The lights burst into gold, and his world changed forever. Golden confetti rained from the rafters like shimmering pieces of heaven, swirling around Miggs in slow motion as he knelt at center stage. The world around him moved like a dream, blurred by tears, bright with impossibilities suddenly becoming real. Every heartbeat echoed like thunder in his ears. Every breath felt like the first breath he had ever taken. His hands trembled as he pressed them against his face, trying to steady himself, but the emotion was too big, too overwhelming, too unbelievable. He had watched the golden buzzer moments countless times back home in Cebu, on a cracked phone screen, in a small sala with a weak electric fan humming in the background. With his grandfather's arm wrapped around him, saying, "Someday, Hijo, maybe this could be you." Back then he laughed, not because he didn't believe his Lolo, but because the dream felt too giant, too far away. How could a boy from a bustling Filipino neighborhood, who practiced singing beside laundry lines and jeepneys, ever reach a stage like this? But now, he felt the weight of golden confetti landing in his hair, on his cheeks, sticking to his eyelashes. The lights blazing above him glowed like molten stars. The audience stood, every single one, cheering, screaming, crying. People waved Filipino flags. Some shouted Miggs. Others simply sobbed in disbelief. He was living the dream that once felt impossible. Simon stood up from the judges' table, his face softer than anyone had ever seen it, clapping with slow, deliberate pride. Heidi placed both hands over her heart, tears welling in her eyes. Sophia wiped her cheeks while smiling so big it made the whole moment feel even more magical. Howie pointed toward Miggs with a grin, shouting something lost within the deafening roar of the crowd. Backstage, a producer gently guided someone forward, a woman with trembling hands and tear-filled eyes. It was Miggs' mother. The cameras quickly swung toward her as she rushed onto the stage. "Miggs!" she cried. He looked up, still kneeling. Their eyes met across the swirling storm of gold. His mother dropped down to her knees beside him, pulling him into a tight, shaking embrace. Miggs wrapped his arms around her, burying his face in her shoulder, sobbing with the full force of everything he had held inside for years. Ma," he whispered, voice breaking. "We did it. Ma, we did it." She held his face in her hands, giving him the proudest smile a mother could ever give. "Your Lolo is watching you, Anak," she whispered. "He is so proud. So proud." Miggs clung to her, overwhelmed. The cameras captured every second. The golden lights, the confetti, The tears, the reunion, the dream becoming real, the music swelling, the iconic AGT Golden Buzzer anthem, blended with the sound of the cheering audience, creating the kind of cinematic atmosphere that would go viral in minutes. Eventually, the confetti began to settle. Miggs's mother helped him stand, brushing pieces of gold from his hair, while he wiped his eyes again and again, unable to stop smiling. Simon motioned him forward. Still trembling, Miggs walked to the edge of the stage. His mother kept a protective arm around him as they approached the judge's table. Simon leaned across the desk, speaking directly into his microphone, but also directly to Miggs's heart. "I hit the golden buzzer," Simon began, "because you reminded us what this show is all about. You reminded us of the power of music, of authenticity, of emotion. You're not trying to sound like anyone. You're sharing your truth." The crowd applauded. Simon continued, "And you're not just talented, you're special, and the world needs to hear your voice." Miggs didn't know how to respond. He simply bowed his head, tears slipping silently down his cheeks. Howie jumped in next. "You're going straight to the live shows," he said with enthusiasm. "And trust me, kid, you belong there." Heidi clapped her hands. "You have a star quality," she added. "Your voice may be inspired by Elvis, but the emotion, that came from you. That's what makes you unforgettable." Sophia leaned forward with her warm smile. "You made us feel something real," she said. "And that is the most beautiful gift any performer can give." Miggs's mother hugged him again, unable to contain her tears. Backstage, a staff member waved him toward the iconic golden buzzer tunnel, the place every recipient walked through as the confetti fell behind them. Miggs took a deep breath, squeezing his mother's hand. As they walked toward the tunnel, the host met them, cheerful, emotional, hyping up the moment. "Miggs," the host shouted over the noise, "you did it! You just got the golden buzzer!" Miggs laughed, a soft, breathless sound filled with disbelief. I still can't believe it," he said. "You earned it," the host replied with absolute certainty. The producers queued up the slow-motion cameras as Miggs and his mother walked through the confetti-filled hallway. Golden pieces fluttered around them, clinging to their clothes and hair like blessings from above. Miggs looked into the camera, eyes full of hope, voice shaking but strong. "Lolo," he whispered softly, "this is for you." His mother squeezed his shoulder. Behind them, the stage glowed gold. The crowd continued cheering. The judges still watched with pride. The entire world seemed to pause, just to witness the rise of a Filipino boy with a borrowed microphone, a heart full of dreams, and a voice strong enough to move millions. This was no longer the moment Miggs dreamed about. It was the moment that would define him. And as the doors closed behind him, and the confetti continued raining like golden blessings from the heavens, a star was born.